Guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis, and today this is gonna be a great video. We're gonna talk about long range FPV. First, I'm gonna get some coffee. This is my second of 3 cups this morning. Kind of at about a half a cup right now, but I'm drinking some Lavazza Italian coffee. Pretty good stuff. And let's get into it. Yesterday, Radiomaster announced the Bandit. Now, a lot of you guys might be like, well, it's another long-range system, and you know, there's the Ranger, which one should I get? It depends on what you want to do. This one is a 915 system, 915 megahertz. This is what I'm telling people to buy for the last almost 10 years on my channel. 10 years ago, I was flying Easy UHF, and Easy UHF, if you don't know about it, this is some of the most earliest modules that we used for long range. We use these on 60-inch wings, FPV planes, and that's really where my heart is as far as long range goes. And these were also paired up with something we called Eagle Tree. Eagle Tree was great. You could set it up on a stand. We also did 5.8 relays, and I won't get too much into that, but we were also running 1.3 video back in those days, and a lot has changed. And this guy, I'll put his face up on the screen right now. You guys may know him, you may love him, you may hate him. He came out with something that changed the world in 2015. And in 2015, TBS CROSSFIRE hit the market. And right around that same time, he was also targeted by the FAA and fined $10,000. And this was the beginning of the onslaught of the FAA against FPV. And so he became quickly infamous. Trappy pretty much took over the FPV market as far as the low latency operation of TBS CROSSFIRE on racing drones and for penetration and range. So this module is legendary. This is my original one from 2015, and it still works to this day. This is almost, this is 9 years worth of testing coming up at the end of this year. So this is tried and true. I have taken this all over the mountain ranges of Oregon. We fly a distance out in Eastern Oregon, and you know, I've tested this on 7-inch, 6-inch, 5-inch micros, micro long range, nano long range quads, and you know, large as like our 10-inch long range quads. It works. The penetration is great. And I've had minimal fail-safes, but you also kind of have to know where you can be and where you can't be when you're flying at distance. So that's something that you have to learn as you're flying out long range, especially if you're 30 miles out. Now, I haven't flown 30 miles out, but there are a lot of people on the internet that have tested these two types of systems. And this one has been tested out 50 kilometers or more, 100 kilometers for some of the Russian videos. If you go out and check out some of the Russian videos, they're pretty crazy. They do some wild stuff in some remote regions where there's not a lot of people. The Bandit was released yesterday. Now, this is a 915 system that is starting out with very good testing results. I mean, Mohammed, I'll put his picture up on the screen now. He has tested this on an FPV plane, and he put his transmitter and his, I believe it's the Moxon antenna right here on a vertical type of setup like this, and he tested it out to around 126 kilometers. And that's pretty good for one of the first tests. They also tested the micro and nano modules that I have here. So if this works out, and time is, you know, only time's going to tell if this is going to be the system that I switch over to, because I've been using this for so many years. It is so reliable, and it just works. And pilots around the world, you know, love it or hate TBS Black Sheep, this company, they changed FPV forever. They really did. And now Radiomaster for the past few years has been working closely with Wesley and other folks. And, thank God for Wesley and Jai for all the hard work that they've done into the firmware on getting this to be an open source type of application for so many people out there like myself who love to tinker with things. And ELRS to this point, if you're brand new to FPV, this is something that is harder to set up and get into. You have to be kind of a tinkerer to get into ELRS, and at times it's had me scratching my head. And I've even watched some Joshua Bardwell videos just to get myself back to understanding what the hell's going on with the ELRS. I watch JB's videos too. So he's helped me out with ELRS along my journey into ELRS, and I kind of shied away from ELRS for a long time because this one just works so easily. It's so easy to set up, and unlike ELRS, TBS CROSSFIRE has an automatic receiver update. So when you get a new receiver, in the ELRS scenario, many times I've got a new receiver, try to bind it up with the module, and the module firmware update, the module firmware is newer than the receiver. So sometimes, like in case in point Happy Model, there would be two different versions on the receiver, as you have to update both to get to the latest version so that they match, or otherwise they wouldn't bind up. So that was a pain in the ass. And many of the guys know what I'm talking about. If you ever tried to use an FTDI adapter, it can be a big pain. So that's a process that not a lot of new people want to get into, and it doesn't make FPV very friendly or fun for people trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Why doesn't my quad connect to Betaflight? Such a pain in the butt. TBS CROSSFIRE, on the other hand, it has an automatic, and it actually comes up on the OLED screen right here. It says, would you like to update the RX? And you press this little joystick button right here, boom, and it automatically starts to update the receiver to match your module. Now that is game-changing for 9 years now with these receiver systems, these RC links. So this is easily updatable, and it will match up your newest receiver. So if I got, say, the Nano, which this receiver came out in 2017. The Nano was released in 2017. So this one has many years of testing on it as well. And a lot of times it goes on these range type quads, even like a 5-inch, I will use them on because they have great penetration. When I dip behind things along, tall trees and mountain ranges, things like that, I just retain my signal. So that's really great. I've fail-safed a minimum amount of times with this system. So it's tried and true, 9 years now of testing on the channel. So this one is yet to be determined. I do like Muhammad's testing. I was super excited to see him drop that test on the day of the release of this, which was yesterday. So I have great expectations for the Bandit. It looks very similar to the Ranger that came out previously. We have quite a few different things on this module that appear to be a little bit reworked as far as the setup and the external plugs and things go. But we'll get into that a little bit in this review as well. And I will show you an alternate antenna. You don't have to use this giant Moxon antenna. You have a T antenna too. It's a little smaller antenna for a little bit closer range. You probably still get 10 to 15 miles with the T antenna. So I'm sure at Muhammad those guys will be testing that coming up. But I doubt Wesley's going to be testing it. I think he was fined a while back, so he might be still working out some of that stuff. But these guys are really trying to test this hardware for you guys, and I appreciate that as a pilot myself. Want to know how far can these go? Because that's the first thing that people ask in this hobby. How far can it go? How far it can go depends on how much you know about setting up these types of RC links. That's my answer to anyone who asks, like, how far can it go? Well, that depends on you, because there's hardware out there that will get you farther than your batteries can take you. So that's the thing as well. Battery life versus RC link. you're usually going to fail safe down to the ground at low voltage before your RC link gives out on these two types of systems. And it also depends on how you have your antenna set up, what kind of gain you're pumping. So you've got 1 watt on this one, you have 2 watt on this one. So this is a super high wattage on both of these. So, but I'm happy to also tell you guys that Muhammad had pretty much a full link back to the Bandit at like 100 kilometers out, 126 kilometers out, still had full RC link, which is kind of crazy. And that a lot of that depends on your LOS from your ground station to your aircraft. So generally the rule of thumb is you're flying long range, if you're flying an FPV wing or a quad or anything, as you go out, you fly higher as you go, so that you don't lose that sort of LOS between your module and your aircraft way out, up in the clouds somewhere. So yeah, that's kind of how most people that fly long range do it. You can also, do the dip dive and stuff and as well, and up and down the mountain and things like that. That's a whole different style for mostly quads. But I have dove mountains with FPV wings. It's a lot of fun. It's like being an eagle. It's tons of fun, and that's that's where my heart is. FPV planes, my favorite thing. I love it. They also released this dual antenna, diversity antenna receiver as well. It has UFL connectors on it. It has 4 different pads there on it. We'll talk about this a little bit as well. And this one will, pretty much solder up CRSF protocol onto your quad. And without further ado, let's get into a little bit of what Radiomaster's offering when it comes to the Bandit, the Micro, and the Nano receivers and the antennas. But I gotta say, man, this thing looks like a beast, but it has a skinnier profile side to side and almost about the same width as the original TBS Diamond antenna here. So that's good to see. As far as packing, both of these antennas, they're about the same, but this may be more durable for transport, which I like a lot. This thing looks super beastie, and you can swivel it whichever way you want, which is also another good thing. So depending on how you have your receivers on your quad and all that, you guys probably already know that, most of you, is which way you're gonna fly with your antenna facing. So let's get into it, guys. So let's take a little closer look at the Bandit itself. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on my Radiomaster Boxer here. What a great radio this has been. This is my #1 choice right now. And I'm so happy that they sent me this Max edition. It has all the gold trim on here. And my favorite thing about this radio, I gotta comment on this. If you're new to FPV, recently one of our friends had an accident where a husband passed off a quad to his wife and was taking the transmitter off of his neck, and the neck strap caught the switch and armed it. So I love the fact that I can make my arm switch, this SE function, two function switch here, much better for an arm switch because it doesn't get caught on things. I don't know how many times I've had a neck strap or something like my sweatshirt or my jacket catch a switch and flip this, either the flight mode or the arm switch, and arm a quad on me. So I really have to praise Radiomaster for this kind of invention of this SE style switch. This has not so far been pushed on accident. You really have to deliberately press this down, and it makes a huge difference. Now here is the back of the transmitter, and mine's the full-size JR Bay, and that's what you're going to get if you get this Radiomaster Boxer. And again, this is the Max edition with all the leather grips and everything on it, but you don't need to do that. You can run this on any full-size JR module bay that accepts this, like the TX16S has that, as well as this one. The Express ELRS is up top on the OLED screen, and let's just dive a little closer to that screen. All right, guys, working on my 3rd cup of coffee now, and with that, let's go ahead and talk about the interface, the OLED display. It looks pretty nice. It is a high contrast OLED display. Right now it's kind of hilarious. It's showing me version unknown. Maybe because mine's a prototype. I don't know. It doesn't even know what firmware it's running. It's kind of scary. 200 hertz right there for the packet rate, and underneath that is your current power that your module's outputting. So we're outputting at 100 milliwatt right now. We have a 164 there, TLM, and we have a 5-position joystick in the center. It goes 4 directions and pushes down to make a selection. And left and right, we have 2 customizable buttons here. They are momentary buttons that you can press for changing things, or say you want to add a specific function to these buttons, you can do that. And they also have this like nice gunmetal exterior, which also acts as kind of a heat sink, which draws the heat away from the internal module, which is nice. Gets it away from all that hardware. And mine came with a nice plastic cover, so if you're traveling, this is kind of nice. It'll keep the scratches off your module case. So I can see that this module case could probably receive some good scratches. It does stick out from the radio quite a bit, so I suggest keeping your module and everything out of your radio while you're traveling and keep that nice and safe. Now, if we want to go into the menus, we're going to press on the button here in the center, and that can let us change our packet rate. Right now it's set to 200, but if I press that, it will take me all the way through the different settings, all the way up to full packet rate and back down to the stock 200. Now, if I go up again, I have VTX admin. I can change things and send band and channel off to my VTX from the module. We also have a Wi-Fi admin. You can go in here and change your password bind mode as well, which this is pretty much the same interface as what we saw with the Ranger. BLE gamepad, and motion detect. This one also has a built-in accelerometer in here as well, so that's kind of nifty. It has a telemetry ratio in here, which is nice, standard race, so guys that are racing, and 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Mine was set to 64 here, and you can change it to off. I'm going to put it right back to 64. We can go up to TX power, and we can change that to max power, which would be 1 watt. And again, like Liam tested it all the way up to 1 watt. It is cranking out 1 watt. Dynamic setting, which is a very nice option. So dynamic setting allows this module to run the lowest output of power sitting on the bench. And it depends on how far away your receiver is to the module. So the closer it gets, the lower the dynamic power will be. So that's kind of cool that it will do that. That's super cool. Let's just go back out of this, and we're going to leave this on dynamic power for the time being. And the further out it goes, the higher the power will change. So you're not running like 1 watt on the bench. There's no need to do that. You're just draining your battery in your internal battery in your radio if you're running full power. So change it to dynamic, and it should use way less battery power. Now let's talk about antennas real quick. For this particular Bandit module, you can get 2 types of antennas for it. It did come with the Moxon antenna. This one is a directional antenna. It is not an omnidirectional. If you want an omnidirectional antenna, you will probably want to get the DMNI antenna. This one's more of the T-style antenna, omnidirectional. They do have different power in dB and gain levels. So this one has 4.6 dBi, which is going to be your maximum gain, which is probably going to get you the furthest range. It has an SMA RP connector on here. I know some of you guys want to know that. And it also has an impedance of 500. Now, this one is directional. Again, you can turn it on the vertical or you can run it sideways. And it really depends on how you're flying your antenna on your quad. So if you're mounting the dual diversity antenna on here on your quad, you want to put one vertical and one horizontal on your quad to get the maximum signal packet rate back to your antenna. If you're using the singular antenna, you want to match this up with the way it is mounted on your radio. So if you have it on the vertical, you want to turn this antenna to the vertical and mount it like this. And a lot of times with these types of antennas, we use a little zip tie, and we mount it to the frame somewhere where it's out of the way of the props, and we'll heat shrink along that zip tie on both sides of this. You can also get this sort of Immortal T version and pop this UFL connector off and put this version on here if you don't like this style. This kind of reminds me of the original CROSSFIRE antenna from TBS Black Sheep. It's very similar to it, but it looks a little more durable where the connection is between these two wires, which is kind of nice. And again, this one is pretty minimal. It looks a little more minimal than the original TBS Immortal T antenna. Just a little lighter weight, which is kind of great. Any grams that we can save in FPV is great, but 4.6 dBi on the Moxon antenna. It is more of a directional, not an omnidirectional antenna. So if you're flying more proximity type of flying, this one has to be pointed toward the quad or the FPV wing that you're flying. So in the general direction that you're flying, you want to make sure if you're flying your transmitter on a tripod mount, if you're doing super long range, you want to make sure, again, that's pointed in the direction that your aircraft is. The omnidirectional, it doesn't matter. So if you're flying FPV freestyle or racing, this is probably the antenna that you want. This will do just fine. For more long range applications, you want to get the Moxon antenna. And this antenna has a lower dBi gain on it, 2.7 dBi versus 4.6 on the Moxon antenna. And this one's called the DMNI antenna. It's a traditional T-style antenna. It does appear to be a little bit taller than the original T antennas that came with the Ranger, but I'll have to go back and compare those myself. It also swivels depending on which way you have your antenna mounted on your quad or your FPV wing. And now that you have an idea of which antenna you should buy for racing or proximity freestyle versus long range, let's talk about the receivers that they released. They released the singular antenna, which is the BR1 series CRSF protocol. It has 4 different tabs on here for ground, 5 volt, and TX and RX on here. Very similar to TBS CROSSFIRE antennas and nano modules. And we also have this diversity antenna, true diversity, a BR3 antenna with 4 connection tabs on here as well. And it has a physical button on here. So this one will be a smaller physical button as well. So that's kind of nice. You can also put these into bind mode by taking the battery, plugging in your quad 3 different times, 1, 2, 3, and it will put this LED into a blue flashing light scenario. That way you can start to bind up from your Radiomaster Boxer or TX16S. So that's kind of cool. They're making it a little bit easier to bind up, and these should match up with the firmware that you receive. So you shouldn't have to update these receivers with Express ELRS. So if you're new, that's great news for you, because sometimes it could be a pain to update these. But this one is going to be for more long-range planes and wing type scenarios, or if you're trying to fly a 7 or a 10 inch out at a super maximum distance and you want to have the best signal and connection. Again, you want to mount one vertical and one horizontal somehow on your quad or FPV plane. And this one should give you the highest, most reliable packet ratio back to your module. Now, this one is going to be for freestyle and proximity and maybe a racing application. And it does come with this style antenna, but again, is also upgradable to their sort of miniature Mortal T here. So this is probably what I would recommend to be a little easier to mount to the back of the quad, because so many quads out there, bind and flies, have these little TPU mounts that have a spot for both antennas to come out the side. And usually that's going to be mounted on the horizontal axis on your quad, right at the rear of the quad. Some people put them on the arm facing a diagonal, but it really just depends on what your quad setup looks like. Let's go ahead and weigh the BR1 here with its stock antenna. I'm just going to pull this connector off here, put everything on the scale, and see what we get. Pretty light at 1.6 grams there with the BR1 and the antenna. And now let's try both of these antennas for the BR3 at 1.7 right there, already heavier than the entire assembly for the other receiver. Now both antennas weigh 3.6 and the BR3 is bringing us up to 4.9 grams. So at this point in the video, hopefully I gave you enough information to give you an idea of which one of these modules you're going to buy and for what reason you're going to buy it and use it for. It really depends on what you want to do. So if you're going to fly out super long range, you're going to fly an FPV plane or a wing, and you're going to just do mountain soaring and things like that, or cloud surfing, you definitely want to get the full-size Bandit and run your maximum 1 watt power with a ground station and an external battery on the bottom. So it's nice to see that it uses up to a 4S battery. I would probably stick to the 2 and 3S option for external power. But if you're running 1 watt, you definitely want to use a Moxon antenna for the best directional range setup. If you're flying something like an everyday freestyler 5-inch or even a 7-inch, you would be totally fine with a half-price version of the Bandit with the JR version. So this will fit on the TX16S radios as well as the Boxer that I have over there and the Boxer Max. So that's the one I recommend, the Boxer or the Boxer Max with this type of setup. This will be the most economical range scenario. And again, they're all producing or all spec'd out at 1 watt power. So and I love that they all have a fan. But in Liam's testing, again on Mads Tech, he tested these out with his RF or his power tester that it came out to just under 1 watt for the nano version. So these two are pumping well at 1 watt, whereas this one, his version, was not. So that's be taken with a grain of salt. Maybe it was his prototype that's kind of messing up, but we'll have to figure out coming up really if other people have that same problem with the nano version. So, but again, like it's 3/4 of the power I think he tested it at. So I wouldn't be too worried about that if you're only using this for FPV freestyle or medium range mountain surfing. So, and you have a nano bay on the radio, and this will be perfect for something like the Radiomaster Pocket. So the Boxer, the TX16S for both of these full-size JR module base, and again, like depends on also the antenna setup. You can use this antenna on either of these two. So if you want to fly a longer range with a more directional antenna, you can get this Moxon and put it on either of these, or you can put the what they're calling the DMNIT antenna on the full-size Bandit. So hopefully, again, like you've found some information in this video that will kind of help you figure out which one of these you want to buy, what antenna combination, and what receiver you're going to start out with. The diversity one I always recommend for the best connection to the quad, to your module. So that one's going to be great for better penetration. So if you're looking for better penetration, use the diversity antenna and range. And if you want kind of an all-around one, you can go for the singular antenna version. So I think they're a pretty good price on those, and for $100 it's already half the price of my original CROSSFIRE module, but time will tell. These have to be tested for the next couple years to get the amount of reliable and trusted data that the community needs. So if you're testing them out there, please let us know in the drone camps community, because guys in our community, we have a strong and deep long-range FPV following. A lot of guys on the channel are watching our 7-inch reviews and 10-inch reviews, and these modules are dropping at the right time because wintertime, I was just telling someone recently, wintertime is a great time to fly range because we have a lot less heating issues with our modules, radios, and less brownouts on our VTXs, because everything stays a lot cooler when it's nice and cool outside, unless you're getting to extreme cold temperatures where it's below 0 type of settings. That's not optimal. Either too hot or too cold for long range is not good, but it's a lot of fun flying these, and I'll be testing these more for all different types of scenarios coming up on the channel. If you want to grab any of these in any different setup that I've explained to you today, please do use our links down below because it does benefit the channel. I'd appreciate that kickback. I do get a kickback. I got these for free. And again, I'll be testing these in an open environment for
giving you guys that data back on the channel. So be sure to subscribe on the channel to find out how they're testing out for me, and in the next 6 months, if I'm actually going to graduate over to using ELRS full-time on a lot of my bind and flies and my custom built quads versus my 9 years of using TBS CROSSFIRE. Will we finally break up? Will TBS CROSSFIRE and the Drone Camps channel finally break up? It's headed in that direction, because man, I'm starting to look at the other girl at the bar here, so to speak. So she's looking pretty sexy and has a lot of features, and man, she's a lot cheaper to run than TBS CROSSFIRE is. She's an expensive date. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and the comparison and the overview of the new Bandit series from Radiomaster. Guys, take care. I'm Justin Davis, and I will definitely see you guys on the next one.